The Brandon Best Podcast. Episode 3. Cell Agriculture with Chris Fetterly. Follow on Instagram or Twitter at The Brandon M. Best for updates, to give feedback, and to get involved in the conversation.
My guest today is a friend of mine, Chris Fetterly. He has a background in chemistry and actually a PhD specifically specializing in nanomaterials. Right now, Chris is working at a biotech startup called Future Fields that does cellular agriculture and makes a solution for growing synthetic meat. Today, Chris is going to shed some light on some cool things coming out of the biotech space and some potential benefits we could see. Enjoy. Thanks for being the first guest, I guess, obviously. It's nice to have you on, someone to talk other than me just ranting about stuff I do not know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no worries, man. I mean, sometimes talking to yourself's the only way you can have an intelligent conversation.
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to start by asking you if you could fill me in, and I guess the listeners, onto what it is Future Fields is kind of doing with cellular agriculture, and maybe how you guys are positioning yourself or affected by the current situation with the pandemic.
Yeah, okay. We can dive right in. So Future Fields is a cellular agriculture company. Cellular agriculture is kind of the catchphrase to describe the industry. So that's basically any company that's using techniques that you'd find in tissue engineering and cell biology, and are using these techniques to grow animal products from cells instead of getting them from an animal source. So yeah, the company started around 2017 or so. There's a large organization called New Harvest, and New Harvest actually started with someone here in Edmonton named Isha Datar. She's really cool. And Matt got a grant. Matt is one of the co-founders of Future Fields, to do some research there. He got really interested and excited about cell ag. And then after that, they went to a conference, had more discussions, decided, okay, let's form a company and start growing meat. Let's take a stab at doing lab grown meat. And the goal was to culture chicken and grow chicken right from chicken cells. So yeah, the company started out as like what we would call, it's like quote unquote full stack cell ag company,
Right.
where you're doing everything in house, and the end product is a consumer good. You're trying to produce chicken in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And they started to do that. Made a prototype, cultured chicken. I have a photo I can send to you. It's pretty cool. It's like a cube of chicken. It looks like chicken. After producing that prototype, they're like, okay, crunch some numbers and said, this is really expensive. This is the equivalent of $3,500 or so US per pound. So that's not going to work, right? Like that's an expensive chicken nugget.
How much is chicken per pound right now?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question.
I think it's relatively cheap, because I just watched Super Size Me 2, and that was all about chicken and stuff. So I got a peek into that whole industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, some of those facts that I don't know that I should probably have off the top of my head, pretty new in the company, so that'll come over time.
It's definitely cheaper than what was made.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So that's the whole goal, really, right? Is to get companies to the point where they're at price parity, right, with a traditional animal product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cultivated chicken, traditional sourced chicken, and they would be the same price, which is very challenging. So they produced this prototype, had this prototype, $3,500, and then I'm trying to remember the order of operations. I think they got into an accelerator in Singapore, which is called Grow, and that's a partnership with Ag Funder, which is a large organization that's been very early into a lot of food tech, has now some alternate protein funds, and is very focused on the future food. So they were in the first cohort of Grow, and it was during that experience, I think, that they decided to actually pivot the entire business model and say, why be another consumer product focused company in cell ag? There's this whole B2B space in what's going to be an absolutely massive industry that is just as ripe for disruption and as wide open. Because the current limiting factor, well, there's a couple of them, but the biggest cost input is growth media. You need something, you need nutrients to feed these cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need feed for your livestock, you need feed for your cells. It's the same sort of idea. So when you're culturing cells, you're squirting in this stuff called growth media, and you're adding something sometimes called fetal bovine serum. And fetal bovine serum is great. Scientists have been using this stuff forever, but the name suggests it comes from fetal calves. When you slaughter a cow, you bleed out the fetal calf, and then that serum is used for a host of different science applications, and it works amazing. But number one, it's undefined. Number two, it comes from fetal calves, so it's not the most ethical source.
Yeah.
And number three, it's extremely expensive. So you can't scale on this.
Right.
Like, it could work. Like, you could, if you had no money, if you had unlimited money, I'm going to sell to a cell ag startup. Yeah, you could make a product on FBS. But you can't. In reality, you actually can't. So our CSO Matt came up with a way to. He developed a recombinant protein platform. This is a biomanufacturing suite of tools that allows you to produce proteins in a different way. So he came up with this idea, and the company now has this platform where we can make very specific proteins that go into this growth media that ultimately helps cells to grow. So FBS, undefined, has a ton of stuff in it. We know it's got these key elements. There's growth factors in there, but there's also a lot of other things we're not quite sure. And then there's this other suite of serums called serum-free media. Other suite of media. And serum-free media has been around for a while too, but it's also very expensive. And it's expensive because the key elements in there are these things called growth factors. They're proteins. And they're super expensive themselves to buy because the companies that produce them, the big companies that serve the pharmaceutical industry, they produce these growth factors, and then the pharmaceutical industry has no problem paying exorbitant prices for these things because the end products in pharma are, typically priced quite high, and they're doing fine. They're making lots of money. Yeah. But now when you take the same set of suppliers that's supplying pharma with growth factors and therefore growth media with these growth factors, those same set of companies looking to supply that material to cell ag companies, it's the same situation. It's like, okay, that's great. That's serum free. You've removed the FBS, but we still can't afford all this. Like, these growth factors are insanely expensive. So that's the crux of future fields is we have a recombinant protein platform. We can make growth factors, custom growth factors, very inexpensively. Mm-hmm. We can scale very quickly. Just the nature of our work, and obviously I can't dig into how we're doing what we're doing, but it's super scalable, and a good way to think about it is it's kind of, there's a modularity to this. And so we can do custom growth factors, we can scale quickly, and we can ultimately supply either media or growth factors, whatever the company wants, at a level where they can actually have a sustainable operation as they grow. There's public reports that say, it's expected that consumption levels of these companies are going to be on the order of 20,000 to 100,000 liters a month, just chugging through this stuff called growth media, right? And then so if you work backwards from concentrations, this is a lot of growth factors that are going in there. And so super expensive.
Yeah. That seems to be the biggest roadblock that comes up, is always the price. But I'm wondering now, what's the comparison in terms of time of cultivation when you're taking a chicken and raising it and then slaughtering it? What's that compared to growing an equivalent piece of chicken?
It's way faster.
Okay, so that's usually not a big roadblock. It's just kind of the price.
Yeah, the big roadblocks are the price and the technologies, right? So to do this at to do this at the massive scale is required. As well as like there are other challenges that come in depending on what you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to make like a cultured steak, right?
Yeah.
A steak has a structure to it, right? It has a texture, it has a taste, it has all these other elements that food scientists know in deep detail. So when you try to but when you're culturing a cell, you're making one type of tissue. There's fat in there, right? There's other muscle cells in there that make this beautiful, juicy steak that you can appreciate.
Yeah.
So there are different approaches that these companies are taking. Some of them are, we're going to produce a product that's kind of minced, and it's going to go in minced meat products, and it'll be more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. A product that's had some work done to it, right?
Right. It sounds like
process.
a raw piece
Thank
of
you.
meat. Yeah, process.
Yeah, process.
Right.
God, can't think today. But yeah, process. So there's a number of companies going that route. Like sausages too, hot dogs, chicken nuggets. This is a classic. And then there are some companies that are like, well, they're making cultured seafood.
Oh,
And
okay.
like cultured fish, like cultured bluefin tuna, right? And that's different because you don't have to sell that at the price points of ground meat. You sell it at a much higher price level. So there's more, price elasticity.
Right.
They have a bigger bandwidth of what they can handle on their cost inputs, depending on.
They could effectively make different types of seafood cheaper, since those are, market prices. When you go to a restaurant, it's lobster. It depends on what the current market price is. If they could do a synthetic version, it could be, a static one, I guess, if they want. So they could potentially make it more accessible, I'd imagine.
Yeah. There's so many benefits that come with this industry, man. Like, you stop overfishing oceans for these at-risk animals, right? Like when you get into the whole ethical side, there's the environmental side. There's a number of benefits that come with the cultured meat industry, and a number of interesting thought experiments when you extrapolate into the future what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's very cool to be working in this field. I never expected.
So what's been the uptake in people kind of, at least, I don't know if there's opportunities to actually consume this meat yet out in the market, but in terms of, has there been some ramping up in production of this stuff in preparation for it launching over the past few years?
Yeah. So I guess there's kind of two questions baked in there. One is about sort of consumer perception. And then another one is like, when are we going to see these things on market?
Right.
So like there are companies that are putting things on market. 2021 is the goal for some of these cultured goods. There have been a number of public tastings since the very first one. I think 2013 might have been the first big public tasting. That was the burger. That was $300,000 to make a burger patty. Yeah, that was really interesting. Yeah. And so we're going to see these products very soon. I'm not sure where, to be honest. Like there's a number of regulatory hurdles. Like, what do we call this stuff? Right? Yeah. What is it? How do we treat this? And so, which market is the first? I'm not sure, but the consumer perception is there, the consumer acceptance is there. There's a study released actually really recently, maybe a month ago, that said acceptance goes up with education when you learn more about it, because with the cultured meat, there's kind of like quote unquote the ick factor.
Yeah.
So there can be a gut reaction. It's like, oh gosh, you're making this in the lab. Like, I don't know. Like, that sounds gross, right? But I have to ask, wonder, are we really asking the right questions for consumer perception? It's like the way I would do it. It's like, here's a steak, and here's a steak, and these are identical on a molecular level, right? In every way, shape, and form, and taste. Let's just extrapolate a bit, and we'll assume we've worked out all the technical details.
Right.
This one slaughters animals. This one doesn't. Like, what do you even if you're not like an ultimate hardcore vegan, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if you're not, the choice is like pretty heavily weighted towards one towards the other, like given that information.
Not even mentioning the environmental impact as well.
Yeah, exactly. But to me, that's the big kicker.
Right.
like I've been a vegan, I've been a vegetarian, and I've switched back since we had a kid, and we could talk about that if you want, but like that for me was that, like, that's the real changeover. Like when you have two options, and this one kills an animal and this one doesn't. There's no
Yeah.
suffering here. There's
It seems like a
suffering.
no-brainer almost.
Yeah, like Sam Harris did. He just did a little Twitter poll
Hmm.
about this, and that's how he phrased his question. He had like pretty good numbers on his Twitter poll. I want to say he had, I think 1,000, maybe at least 500. But like his followers are obviously very biased, right?
Yeah.
Some selection bias in the type of people that follow him. But they were like, yeah, of course. And then the people that said no were like, well, what's the reason, right? And so a number of them are vegan.
Oh,
and
I see.
and at that point, so it's the industry is introducing a number of like moral personal dilemmas, maybe. I don't know. It's like, okay, I'm a vegan, but this is cultured. Can
Hmm.
I eat this now? What does that mean? Like, it doesn't,
Right.
no
It's a
animals been
totally new
killed.
area for vegans to venture into and ask themselves, what comes down, what are their motivations as to being vegan, and that kind of translates into whether or not they agree with
Yeah.
cellular agriculture and synthetic meat, I suppose.
Yeah, like I can imagine cell ag almost helping to define a new category of diet, right? Like think
Interesting,
about
yeah.
that. Like, and this is the first time this has come into my head. I've never thought about this before until
Yeah.
now. It was just like, oh, I'm an in vitro-atarian. Like, what do we call this? I'm a
Yeah.
cultivated. I only eat cultured meat. Maybe those people will exist in 20 years.
It's
Like
very possible. It's very possible. And
right
I'm
now, the
wondering
catch-all
if
is flexitarians, right?
yeah. So I'm wondering, I guess, to pull it into something topical with COVID. There's a
Sure.
lot of conversation around like those wet markets in other parts of the
Mm-hmm.
world, and how it seems some of the conversations I've heard around them is, oh, that's their culture, that's part of their society, or maybe it's a necessity for them. And do you see cellular agriculture playing a role in maybe helping shift at least a portion of those areas away from that lifestyle of eating in order to kind of contain the risk for something like COVID-19?
Yeah, and it's so again. There's more to that. There's the safety element. Like,
Yeah.
does cultured meat actually remove the risk of wet markets and zoonotic diseases, or significantly reduce it?
Yeah.
Um, and my going opinion is very strongly yes, it does, and
Right.
it will reduce this risk substantially. But the other part is like what you hinted at was the cultural shift, and are people who are used to buying food from these wet markets where they can go in, they can buy, they can see the animal, they point to the food source, they feel a connection to the food source.
Yeah.
It is slaughtered and then it is given to them. I don't I don't know enough to say about what that experience means to them to
Yeah.
go into these wet markets and purchase food in that way. I could I could think that if it was done out of necessity and there was an alternative available that they knew, again, more information they knew was likely to be safer or cleaner or what have you, that they would go to that source. Um, but like it's really hard to change people's minds, man. It's really
Yeah.
hard. Like if they've got it, like this is the way I eat, and it somehow ties into their core identity. um you can't change everyone's minds. Some
Yeah.
people will shift, probably some people will shift.
Yeah. I'd
um
imagine. I think
and with
with the wet
regulatory
markets.
changes,
Sorry, go on.
sorry, with regulatory changes like what China's doing right now with wet markets, like it might not be an option anymore in the future. You might just not see wet markets, right?
Right.
It's like, you know what? We're done. They're banned. No more wet markets.
Yeah, China's definitely a country that wouldn't be afraid of being heavy-handed with handling that kind of situation either.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, I think it comes down to, I guess, if you could educate, like you said, education plays a lot as a role of getting
Mhm.
people on board with this kind of thing. And if you think about I'm trying to think about the type of people and like the kind of economic status and income levels of people who either
Mhm.
run these wet markets or even shop there. Selling synthetic meat might not exactly be accessible for them. Like, how do you get them involved in that industry? Obviously, if you make it cheap, then in terms
Yeah.
of for the buyer's side, it becomes a viable option. But then, there's always going to be pushback against people. Again, if I'm a wet market dealer and that's part of my
Yeah.
identity, that's my culture, my family's been doing it for generations, there could be a lot of pushback, even though it's potentially safer for everybody. So it's kind of it's a landmine question, and especially when you tie in things like culture and identity and whatnot into it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like this is not going to come in a one fell swoop, right?
Yeah,
It's not. We're not going to get this experience where entire industries have to react to this very quickly. It's we're going to have a trickle of products on the market, and then with that is going to come media attention, and with that is going to come questions from the consumer base and more information, and then we'll slowly see this percolate across the planet in different ways.
hmm
Um, so yeah, that specific population, I don't know.
yeah. And I don't even know how big of a population and how many actual areas live off and have these wet markets. It seems to be mostly Southeastern Asia and kind of Indonesia area around there, but yeah, it's like you said, it's something that we're gonna have to see change, or it's probably stuff's gonna happen in like 10, 20 years. It's not gonna be just tomorrow or as soon as the quarantine's kind of over that they're gonna go in and change everything.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, multifactorial problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's for sure. I mean, what we are seeing, like, because you're looking at, okay, how does COVID and satellite interact? And like right now, at least in alternative protein in general, like you could go alternative protein, and then underneath that, you can go cultivated and plant based, right?
Right.
Um, and we are seeing a massive shift
Yeah.
towards plant based right now. It's we've got these big companies, Impossible Foods and beyond, that are now rolling out in China because um, when that country decides that something isn't safe or an alternative needs to be found, like they do it.
Yeah.
Um, so we're going to see pretty large market adoption of alternate protein very quickly. Uh, and so I might be wrong. Like what I said with the slow trickle, like I could be completely wrong. It
hmm
might be fast.
Do you
It's
think
it's kind of the fun of being in a new industry. Like it really feels like there's a fever pitch. Like
yeah.
it's just like Wild West. What's this person doing? Oh, that like anytime you learn about a new company, it's like, oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's interesting. And wow, what about the ramifications of that? And
Yeah,
it just
exactly.
that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. I keep thinking about how what you mentioned with like a new type of diet, a new type of vegetarian and in vitro tarian. Is that what you called it?
I
Might
don't
have
know.
to trademark that.
Cultivarian.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
I guess I've noticed as you've been at Future Fields, you've been kind of looking more at kind of the biotech space as a whole. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering what kind of other really cool, subsections of biotech you've been seeing as you've been looking around, and what other cool things are coming down the pipeline potentially.
Yeah. Well, that's a really big question.
Yeah.
I mean, so I tried to think about like why what fundamentally about my interests that drew me to future fields and cultured meat, and I kind of come up with this sort of model of thinking about what I consider are inevitable industries or inevitable businesses. It's like an industry that is very much on the edge, seems kind of sci-fi on out there, requires significant advancements in knowledge to actually roll it out, but it's very likely that it's going to happen, right?
hmm
That, and I definitely felt that way with cultured meat. I was like, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's coming, right? There's a few things we need to solve, but it's not beyond the realm of physics. Like we need some new bioreactor designs, and we have to do some protein engineering. Like we can do this, humans.
Right.
Um, So there's a number of other spaces that I kind of think about that way in biotech and outside of biotech. Like the other thing I'm really interested in biotech is just the general approach to longevity and health and treating age as a disease. David Sinclair in Australia, he's been kind of preaching the scientific gospel of anti-aging research and anti-aging work, and this kind of holistic view of aging as a disease itself and all of these other factors that play into aging. I think we're going to see some pretty big changes that come from this. There's a number of interesting startup companies, both venture backed, new startups that are popping up in this quote unquote longevity space that is now just getting some kind of legitimacy because of people like Sinclair and more media personalities like Peter Attia and back in the day when I was keen on it was like when Ray Kurzweil was talking about it, the prophet of Silicon Valley. I don't know if you're familiar with Ray Kurzweil, but he wrote the book The Singularity is Near, and a few of these other things. I think he's like chief of engineering at Google now.
Okay.
But back then he was totally out there. Like, guy was nuts. Like, thought he was nuts, right? Red wine every day because it's got resveratrol in it.
Yeah.
And, but it's turning out like a lot of the stuff he was talking about is pretty legitimate in general trends.
Yeah.
He's got some ideas that I think are just bonkers. It's not going to work. But I think he was the reason I had this initial spark about longevity, and I've been thinking about it for a while now. Not intensely, and there, actually, funny enough, there was one point in my graduate career where I almost switched to a research group that was focused on aging, because they were working with they were developing some genetic tools. A guy came over, and he used to be a postdoc in Sinclair's lab. He ended up at U of A, and I found out about him, and I was like 3 years into my PhD, and 2.5 years, I was having a rough time. So, all PhD students do at some point. They get to this, like this is awful, not all of them. There are a few of them that just love it all the way through. But many students, that's why like mental health is such an issue. Grad students get to the point where they're like, okay, this is go, no go for me. Like, what am I doing? Am I going to push through this or not? And you start looking at alternatives. Should I switch? Should I leave? Should I go to a master's instead? What should I do?
Right.
Like it's a really intense experience doing a PhD. And as part of that, searching around, I found this guy's lab, and that was the closest I came to ever actually like really working in what I would call longevity.
Yeah, I heard about it first through David Sinclair as well. Actually, I think a number of years ago, there was a Netflix documentary that highlighted two different scientists out of the States that were kind of leading it, or at least from a publicity standpoint, were the most public about it. But I remember you mentioning to me the other day that you had an idea that you thought of, and I wanted you to riff on it now because it sounded, again, a cross section between two technologies. I think it was quantum physics and longevity.
Yeah. So like, what I was saying the other day was like, not a specific business idea, but I feel like there's something there at the intersection of quantum computing and longevity research. And that's not crazy talk. There are people who are doing this right now. Menton AI is doing this, not specifically longevity, but using quantum to develop drug targets. In silico medicine does the same thing because quantum's pretty good at specific ML applications, apparently. But this is another kind of vertical or industry, I don't know the right word to describe this, that I feel like is inevitable.
Right.
Quantum computers are being developed. They're being developed rapidly. Resources are being poured into them. The benefits that come with a noiseless quantum computer, if and when we actually get one, will be tremendous. So quantum computers are friggin' awesome. So I've always been thinking of them. And now what's so amazing is that they're accessible to anyone on the planet.
Yeah, well,
IBM has Qiskit. D-Wave has their tool. Like
Google,
anyone.
Google just make like the fastest one ever, like last year or something like that.
Yeah, they pushed out an article that said they had quantum supremacy. They they ran their quantum computer on a couple of algos, and they said, yes, this is significantly faster than a classic computer to solve the same problem, and therefore they declared that they have quantum supremacy. Whatever that is. This is a loaded term, quantum supremacy.
Right.
But yeah, so bio longevity, there's this very small space of known proteins that exists, and then there's this massive space of unknown possible proteins, which is like an exponentially complex problem when you're getting to protein engineering and protein design and drug design. One thing quantum computers are really good at are optimization problems.
Yeah.
Right. And with protein design and general small molecule design, there's so many factors that have to be optimized. And so there's a good fit there in principle. Obviously, layering on some other technologies that are needed. It's not like you just say, "Oh, I'm going to buy a quantum computer and I'm going to start doing drug discovery." And away I go, hunky dory, march down into the promised land. Like, no, not going to happen, right? This is a 10-year endeavor at least, just to get some feet underneath you.
Yeah.
But yes, so I was riffing with you. I was like, it would be wonderful to just like get going on a company that develops some really promising longevity targets. And if it made sense, use quantum computers to do it. Right. So I don't know exactly what that looks like.
Right.
But I feel like if I got fired, I would spend a few months researching this and deciding if it was something I could chase. So that's another like, while I'm on this inevitable industry, the other one I'm really keen on, this is not biotech though, but is fusion. Right? So you get General Fusion out of Vancouver. Millions of dollars are being pumped into this company. There's some really cool designs that are coming out with fusion reactors at MIT in Japan. These kind of toroidal reactors that make fusion reactions possible to sustain a plasma for long periods of time. And I feel like this is another inevitable industry. Like, and all of these will kind of intersect. Some of these are kind of more bedrock technologies, obviously, like a quantum computer would be more of a bedrock technology, which would impact these other ones. But yeah, so that's kind of my mental framework for really cool opportunities in the world.
I saw an article today actually that might be hinting at its fruition, is that there's a possibility of quantum computing at room temperature, which I think usually it has to be run at very, very cold temperatures. Is that correct?
Yeah, it uses superconductors, so it's chilled down to millikelvins above absolute zero. Room temperature quantum computing and room temperature superconducting, for that matter, is like another holy grail in science that's being chased. Right, room temperature superconductor, and we're going to see a lot of big advancements. Very cool.
In coming time. So I know you haven't been in the like nanotechnology chemistry space for a long time, but I wanted to maybe bounce some things off of you just to see
Sure.
what your general knowledge is. Just some things I've been looking into. So one, kind of because I've been thinking about the whole COVID situation, nanomedicine, I believe. So being able to, I don't know, like really specific drugs or like little nanobots that go in your body that can target, diseases or tumors or anything like that. And I'm just kind of wondering from what you know and kind of your knowledge from that space, like how far or how quickly is nanotechnology like developing and stuff like that? How far are we being able to see kind of more of those potential sci-fi benefits?
Yeah, I mean that's so nanotechnology is like it's another kind of bedrock suite of tools, right, that allows for the design and manipulation of materials in the nanoscale regime that have special properties because you're designing them and building them in that regime. The term nanobot brings up something really interesting in people's brains, right?
Yeah.
You start thinking about like a miniaturized robotic molecule that's just like, it's got laser beams and it's going around in your body and it's zapping things and it's chopping other bits out and it's, it's grabbing a hydrogen here and an oxygen here and it's putting things together. And transporting electrons for you in all the ways that you need to be transported. So that kind of stuff is very long way off.
Yeah.
But the term nanomedicine is used really broadly. Like when I was before grad studies, it's funny you brought that up. Like I heard that word and it was so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What does that even mean, nanomedicine? I subscribed for a journal. This is like the Journal of Nanomedicine or something before I was in grad school because I just like wanted to learn more about this. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
This is fascinating stuff. So nanomedicine can mean different things to different people, but I see it generally as like you've developed something that because of its size scale, it behaves differently and it's being applied in medicine. So a good example of this is like anything being done with gold nanoparticles is a classic example. When gold gets really, really small, it behaves weird. It changes colors. It can be used to locally heat areas, and that can be depending on how you decorate that particle. If it attaches to a tumor and then it gets locally heated with some infrared and then it blasts a cell because of that, you can call this is kind of a nanomedicine, right? It's actually a guy in Calgary, so he's doing some work in this area. It's really cool. So that's what I call a nanomedicine. There's other people that are like they're designing really small molecules entirely out of biomolecules. They're lipids, and they're using these lipids to encapsulate other small molecules. And then there's a benefit to this size regime for delivery. You get into like using magnetic particles, like small nanoscale magnetic particles, and then there are things you can do with that for imaging. Looking at the body in different ways, and you could say that these are nanomedicines. But this idea of the nanobot and all of these things going inside of our bodies, and we don't need to eat anymore because the nanobots are taking care of it. That's very far in the future.
Yeah.
Is it a quote unquote inevitable industry? I don't know. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I think we'll be replacing body parts much faster than we'll be developing.
Well, that's definitely. It's funny you say that because so basically how I interact with kind of the people of the podcast, fans of the podcast right now is I'm starting to do daily Instagram story polls. And I'll basically give a choice. So I think the most recent one was, would you rather have super advanced VR equipment or really advanced smart clothes? And then people basically vote. And actually, one of the ones I'm going to do is having either being like genetically enhanced or being cybernetically enhanced, and seeing like what people think. And so there seems to be a big split between whether someone would rather just have gene editing and being able to grow back limbs or whatever that and become kind of what I guess they talked about in Homo Deus, being amortal, rather than replacing full body parts and being kind of cybernetically enhanced. So which of those is going to come first? I guess depends, because they both depend on two different maybe bedrock sciences.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see a hybrid, right?
Yeah.
In the future, you're going to have these. I don't know. Like, this is getting really sci-fi, right? But like, there will be people that engage in these elective processes to change their bodies in different ways. Humans have been doing this forever. We've been tattooing ourselves for ages. But yeah, I think folks that are generally like in the enhancement camp, whether it's cybernetic, whether it's genetic, like they're probably not going to care. It's about the end benefit, right?
Right.
It's like, sweet, I can regrow a limb. Well, that's interesting, but why would I want that when I can have a completely cybernetic limb that's going to give me the ability to do A, B, C, and D, right? And they'll weigh those things against one another and what's available first. Yeah, I think we'll see some kind of weird hybrid stuff happening.
Yeah.
Speaking of your, did you see that contact lens company? the
I
smart
think
contact lens
I
company.
saw you share or retweet something or something like that.
Yeah, they just got
Was it
like this
Mojo or
monster
something?
rig.
I can't
Mojo,
remember.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's like it's coming. um,
Oh
this
man.
whole Deus Ex thing,
Yeah. It's so
like
funny. Elon just changed his Twitter profile pic to Deus Ex, and I was like,
yeah,
oh my god, this is too good.
yeah. Good old Elon, man. What is going on? I don't know. It's
Yeah.
like his Twitter is a gong show right
Oh
now.
yeah,
To be
absolutely. The
honest,
past few days have been a little out of control for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
a
I've
little
been
off the
thinking of
handle.
actually doing like a commentary episode where I go and rewatch the whole Neuralink presentation they did last year, and then
Oh
just like
yeah,
do
cool.
commentary on it and stuff. And I'm waiting for my N1 installment, getting that chip, and just gonna ride the
Yeah,
wave of augmentation.
yeah. I mean, I'm all for it. Like
Yeah,
plug me into the matrix kind of thing.
yeah, exactly.
Why
Uh,
not?
Awesome. So I do have, as I mentioned, I do those polls. So I was thinking of
Yeah.
doing a segment with guests, is actually reiterating the same questions, and then have
Hmm.
you make a choice, and then I'll
Yeah.
kind of reveal the results, and you'll see kind of where you fell in.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
let me just
Interesting.
pull up the poll here. So the first one is, which do you think is easier, turn $100 into $10,000 or turn $10,000 into $1,000,000?
Oh, that's interesting. 100 to 10,000 or 10,000 into a mil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh man, that's really interesting. I think that depends a lot on perspective. I feel like I could turn 100 into 10,000 easier.
Okay, yeah. That was actually the winner by very slim margin. It was 54% to
Uh,
46. And when I was trying to think about it more, I think attributed that to people in their head, they can think of more ways to make 10 grand than they
mhm.
can to think of making $1,000,000 probably. And then you kind of work backwards. It's like, I know all these ways to make 10 grand. Now, which of those can I do with like $100 basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is interesting because it like gets at means, right? It gets
Mm-hmm.
you to think about your means, and capabilities. It's like, well, where are my means and where are my skills, and am I better suited to grow larger sums of money into very big sums of money, or like I think I could do both of those, but I think the first one is a safer bet. I feel like it's more realistically achievable just
Mm-hmm.
off of like straight up tried and true business models.
Yeah.
$100, I can buy myself a lawnmower off Kijiji.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, and there I go. I'm a landscaper.
I was thinking about some of your previous ideas, like the delivery service for home workout equipment and stuff like that. I was like, oh man, that would be potentially could
Yeah.
be so popular right now with the whole
Oh yeah.
quarantine.
Yeah, my brother texted me about that. He's like, "Hey, you remember that crazy idea about home workouts and bundling that with equipment and shipping it and picking it up? Let's do that." I was like, okay. I'm not really in the mindset where I want to execute on this idea anymore. um, but yeah, a lot of coulda woulda beens with
Yeah.
ideas, right?
Okay, our second poll here again is the VR versus the advanced smart clothes. Which one would you rather have?
Would I rather have? So the question was, would I rather have smart clothes? Excuse
Ye-
me, or would I rather have VR?
like advanced VR or like not necessarily stuff that we have capable today. So you can think like really fully immersive haptic suit kind of VR, and then
Yeah,
totally like biometric biomonitoring clothes.
I'd
Anything
rather have
that
the clothes.
the clothes. That was an
Yeah.
overwhelming winner, 74%.
Huh.
And I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah.
Um, because I guess that's still because it's not really a thing yet. It's still kind of ill defined as to what exactly would it do. Whereas VR is like you can go do VR now, but it was kind of interesting.
Yeah. And like I think about that question and one answer is kind of escapism, entertainment, go do and experience things in new ways. Another one, maybe because it's so undefined, is why it got such a big reply. Is like, oh, okay, biometrics, like that sounds really cool. Yeah, I'd love to learn, the whole quantified self thing. I'd love to constantly know more things about myself and be able to action those ideas. I value that much more than my ability to go and jump in the oasis.
Right. Yeah, I think like you said, VR is more when people think about VR, they just think about, video games and those kind of entertainment applications rather than other stuff outside of it. So it's probably why, the broader usages, and obviously like Fitbits, I know you got a Fitbit, all that kind of stuff is becoming more and more
Yeah.
popular. It seems there's all these new biomonitors every other day. I just saw another one that's launching or launched, which is like a ring. It's
The
called,
Aura Ring.
yes. I was trying to look
Yeah.
up reviews on that,
I
and I
was
was
so close to
curious.
buying that sucker.
Oh,
I think I
really?
will.
It's
Yeah. Oh,
expensive.
yeah. It is expensive, but I think that one's worth it.
Yeah.
Just because of like, who said this? I can't remember. It was one that I was following on Twitter. It's like good technology should fade into the background. It should be such a seamless experience that you almost don't feel the technology or interact with it. And the Aura Ring gets really close for me because it's just a ring, a simple ring you put on at night, and it gives you some really key metrics that help optimize, one of the most important parts of your life, which is sleep, right? My buddy has had the Aura Ring for a while now. He's the guy I mentioned you might want to talk to, Eric. He's had an Aura Ring, and he tracks his sleep meticulously and optimizes the crap out of it. And he can see like right away the difference in heart rate variability if he has a drink and goes to bed as opposed to just his normal routine, or if he's trained that day and what that does, and if had too much junk food or whatever. But yeah, really, really interesting, because then you can see the impacts of your everyday life on like, whoa, this is really killing my sleep.
Yeah.
Cup of coffee at 11 a.m. and like my heart rate variability and my sleep score, which is like the aggregate metric that Oura Ring has. So yeah, that's a really cool piece of tech.
Yeah. What drew me to it was just the fact it was a ring and not like a watch, because I'm a watch
Yes.
guy. I like to wear watches.
Yeah.
And that's why I really don't want to get a smartwatch or a Fitbit, because then it's like, well, I'm just going to wear one because I need to, get that data. So the ring looked really enticing to me, but it seems that it's mainly for sleep. I thought it was going to be also, calories burned and steps taken, all that stuff, but I don't know
I'm
how
not
hard it'd be
sure
to
all the
adapt it.
details.
Yeah.
Like I know it's really good for sleep monitoring, and that's my only interest in it. If it does do all these other things, that's wonderful. Like you can get their sizing kit. I got that. I tried it out, and like I was checking it out, and then the world, man. And you change your decisions, right?
Yeah,
So
basically.
it's like suddenly an Aura Ring is less important to me.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm reading Homo Deus right now, and I'm very close to finishing it.
Cool.
And I just finished the chapter where it's talking about how if these kind of decision making algorithms and AI gets to a certain point where there's no reason for me not to listen to them, and they just make most of your life decisions for you. And when I think about that, and then we're also talking about these, biomonitors, it's already starting to, you give it all this data and it tells you, oh, you need to go to sleep earlier. You need to, not eat this close to going to bed and stuff. So it's already kind of trickling into our decision making process. It's like, why would I just go with, gut feelings anymore? Let me just look at the numbers and have this thing tell me what to do.
Totally. And it's like it's you get to really pick your sacrifices too, right?
Yeah.
Because like once you have all that information, and you really know that like alcohol is freaking poison, right? We're drinking ethanol, right? And so how you're imbibing that substance and who you're doing it with, and how you think about that whole process suddenly becomes more intimate and more important. It's like, I'm choosing to have a drink with you. Like I'm arguably making a bit of a health sacrifice here by what we're doing tonight because of how much I value our relationship and this experience together. So that, yeah, it'll do some interesting things the more we know, but we also might get some other developments with psychoactive substances that don't harm our bodies as much.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I guess the last question I'll propose to you is, what is the thing you're most looking forward to doing once quarantine and all this kind of lockdown stuff is over?
What am I most looking forward to doing? Oh, just going out and seeing some good friends and experiencing outside with the more genuine social interaction, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's way past quarantine over. Like I'm yearning for the day when I can walk down the sidewalk and I don't have to completely go around this person by like 6 feet, even though we're both outside enjoying the sunny weather. Like it has such a subtle dynamic where it's just like everyone is really apprehensive towards one another, but you're still trying to smile and nod and acknowledge humanity. And I'm looking forward to when we can just not worry about that anymore.
Yeah, the kind of social tension that you just mentioned, I was thinking about the other day when you're out in public.
Yeah.
And it makes you, I don't know, kind of makes you realize like, oh, we really kind of depend on social interaction to feel. I mean, it's a big part of the human experience, I guess, was what I realized.
Yeah. So much. There's a lot in there with body language, and social tension is a really good way to put it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I felt that the first time I went grocery shopping. I was like, okay, I'm getting hyped up. Just psych myself up. I'm going shopping during a pandemic. Got my N95 mask, and here I go.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being the first guest on this kind of little experiment I'm doing.
My pleasure, man.
Yeah.
Seems like a great experiment.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It felt like something I needed to do for sure. I've been wanting to get back into it for a while, so it's nice to have an excuse and have some time to kind of just blabber into a mic and see what happens.
I listened to your first episode, and it's like wanting to do something about creating and not consuming, and it made me think of an episode. It was Jim Collins, I think, on Tim Ferriss, where he talks about like creative time. And spending more time in creative time versus other time. And so it's cool to see you spending a lot of time in creative time.
Yeah. It's it's a weird experiment, but it's made me think about a lot of different aspects of it, especially like I'm running little social media experiments behind the scenes too. So those are cool. Those are always fun to see.
Really fun. Okay, I look forward to learning more about it.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again, and feel free to plug anything you want at the end if you sign anything out, if there is anything.
I have nothing to plug. Just it's because of COVID. Just be kind to one another. Be kind.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.